This is going to be a bit of a rant video for a second. So if that's not your kind of video, then just, turn off. I appreciate you hanging out. Maybe hit the like button on your way out. But that's what this is going to be because, look, I love Marvel Champions. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I play it all the time, and I play it all the time because I love it. And the reason why I will criticize it sometimes is because I love it so much, right? I really do love the game. But there's one thing. I mean, there's a lot of things that drive me up the wall about the game, like a handful of things. But this one is probably my biggest one. And it's inconsistency with wording. Inconsistency with the wording drives me up a wall. This is why I love playing Legendary, because yes, it's a much more basic game to a point. There's a lot of keywords, but the wording is generally speaking very consistent. At least I haven't seen anything that hasn't been severely inconsistent. The reason why this is a big thing is because normally people will be like, who cares how they phrase things? Well, it matters because it changes how cards work. It changes how different cards interact, and then it changes the rules as well, which we'll get into in a second too. Now, this all kind of stems from a recent live stream I had with Novels. If I haven't put that video up yet, it will be up soon, or if I did put it up, then this will be the response to that video, I guess. I don't know which order it's going to be. It kind of depends when the editor gets to it. So, but anyway, it kind of stems from that. When we were playing a game of Sinister Six. So in this scenario, right, with Doc Ock, he has a force response, right? There's a little star. The star references to the 2 attacks, so you have to do a force response after you attack. After Dr. Octopus attacks and damages you, place 1 threat on each scheme. Move the active counter to the next villain in the activation order, right? Separate period. So when the game first came out, people were really confused about this. I'm still confused about this to this day because I don't like the way that this card is worded. The reason being is because there's 2 ways to read this card. One is the force response. You do as much of the card as you possibly can. So you do after Dr. Octopus attacks and damages you, place 1 threat on each scheme. Period. Done. Sentence is done. Next sentence, move the active count to the next villain in the activation order, right? It doesn't reference the first sentence. It doesn't do anything with the first sentence. It's a completely different thing. So you do one as much as you can, then you do the other, right? You do as much of the card as you possibly can. The thing is, that's not actually how this card works, right? The way it works is that there's a triggering condition. The triggering condition is after Dr. Octopus attacks and damages you, place 1 threat on each scheme, and also move the active count to the next villain in the activation order. So in order to do the second sentence, you have to finish the first half of the first sentence. Okay? A little confusing and a little weird. Now, people might go, well, D20, why is this a big deal, right? Like, you know what it is now. Just get over it. And the problem is because this stuff happens in so many different ways. I'm going to give you a couple of different examples. This is just a few examples. You can do this with like half the villains in the box. It's kind of nuts. And this is the only one that's like this. I checked them all. This is the only one that's like this triggering condition where the second sentence doesn't refer to the first sentence. And that's a part of my issue. But one way they've also done it is with cost arrows, which is kind of weird on villains. It can cause some issues, but whatever, here we are. So Corvus Glaive from the tower defense box. Force response after he attacks. After Corvus Glaive makes an undefended attack, discard the top card of the encounter deck. Cost arrow. Deal 1 damage to Avengers Tower for each boost icon on that card. Right? So you can only deal 1 damage on the Avengers Tower for each boost icon on a card after you were able to discard the top card of the encounter deck, right? So you have to do the first part to do the second part, right? That's how that works, right? So this is the whole cost arrow. There's another way they do things, which is the word then, right? And we'll get into all this in a second. So Nebula, force interrupt. Again, this is attack and scheming, right? She has their 2 little arrows here. When Nebula initiates an activation against you, resolve the special ability on each card attachment in play. Then discard each of those attachments, right? You know the second part of that sentence relates to the first part. Well, one, because it's one sentence, but because it's then, right? It's telling you what to do next. They could even put a period and then write, then discard each of those cards, and you would understand that it relates to the first sentence. They did this with Sandman too in a different way. So it's a force interrupt to attack right here. When Sandman attacks you, that attack deals indirect damage, period. Then it uses the second sentence to relate to the first sentence. If your identity takes any amount of damage from that attack, that one being the one they just talked about, resolve the Surging Sands ability on city streets. So again, this is the one time in the game where the second sentence doesn't make a direct reference to the first sentence, but it falls under the ruling of here's cost arrow, here's then triggering condition. right? It falls under the ruling of triggering condition, which states a triggering condition is a specific occurrence that takes place in the game. On card abilities, the triggering condition is the element of the ability that references such an occurrence, indicating the timing point at which the ability may be used. The description of the ability's triggering condition usually follows the words when and after. So each interrupt and response ability can only be triggered once per occurrence of a triggering condition. Multiple copies with an interrupt or response can be triggered by the same triggering condition. That gets in the whole rules thing, whatever. So that's everything with triggering condition, right? So that is under the envelope of triggering condition, apparently. All right. So if it's like that, triggering condition. If it's cost arrow like this, that falls under this one, where a cost arrow is the cost arrow icon in ability text distinguishes a cost from an effect. So you pay the cost, resolve the effect, right? That's kind of how the format works. Non-bullet text before the cost arrow must be paid and or resolved in full before the text after the cost arrow can be resolved. Well, theoretically, you could do the same exact thing with this, right? You could put the arrow right here between move and scheme, and it would do the same exact thing, right? In order to do all that, right? In order to, after Doc Octopus attacks and damages you, right? You have to do the thing, and then you could put the move here. Now, on some of the cards, it might not work out because it says like discard 7 cards, and if you can only discard 6, like that could cause issues. So I kind of get not using the cost arrow here, but it's still like the same exact reference. So I almost understand that one. Then there's then. And then if the effective text of an ability includes the word then, the text preceding the word then must be fully true and resolved before the remainder of the effect described after the word then can be resolved. Cost arrow. Non-bullet text before the cost arrow must be paid in or resolved in full before the text after the cost arrow can be resolved. Do you see how crazy this is? It's like the same thing, right? They're doing the same exact thing. They're just doing it slightly differently. It's the same with this. When Nebula initiates an activation against you, resolve the special ability on each technique attachment in play, cost arrow, then discard each of those attachments, right? Because you have to do the initiation, the activation, you need to resolve the special ability. After you do that, then you discard attachments, right? You could do the cost arrow. You don't need a then there. And I think then was actually added much later on. Not much later. I think it was added on later. That's the whole thing. And then again, this one goes back to the whole triggering condition thing, because this does the whole when Sandman attacks you, right? That's the triggering condition when he attacks you, which is weird because it's not like, well, this specifically says like this is Corvus Glaive undefended attack. You shouldn't need a cost arrow because that's the triggering condition, right? Makes an undefended attack, right? When Nebula activates against you, you shouldn't need the triggering condition, or that is the triggering condition. Sorry, you shouldn't need the word then. It should just be like the rest of it. So this stuff drives me up a wall because this, look, I'll figure it out and I'll get there and it'll just frustrate me. And I know people are like, why are you making a big deal of making a rules mistake in the video? And there is extra pressure added on to content creators, I think, to make sure you don't make rules mistakes. Obviously, the community is really nice and lenient about it, but it is a pressure I put on myself because people learn from my games, right? In order for me to be a resource for, videos to get recommended in the future, they have to be as close to perfect as possible, right? There are videos that are way old and not even up to date on rules that are still being recommended over myself or Web Warrior or Nelson or Villain Theory or whomever. They're not getting recommended when they make the right rules calls, but older videos are because, it's just kind of what it is. So I want to make sure that my rules or my videos are as close to perfect as possible because I want it to be a good rules reference for people. And when you have these cards that are phrased this way, it makes it tough, man. It makes it tough, right? This is it makes it more convoluted and complicated, and it brings up all these rules questions in general. This is why they've had to make changes to cost arrow, right? It goes to this whole Colossus thing, and maybe we'll talk about this one day with Colossus's one card with a cost arrow. They had to change how things work, and they had to make up deal and take, and they had to do all these things because they didn't keep things consistent. And this is one of probably my biggest pet peeve out there with this game. Once again, I want to reiterate, I love Marvel Champions. I love this game. It's why I play it so much. It's why we do so much of its content on this channel. It's just, this stuff is the stuff that makes it really hard for people to get into the game and stay in the game. Because even when we were talking about it on the live stream, people were getting confused. They were getting frustrated. Like, it's just a frustrating thing. So consistency would be nice. And I know people will look at this video and be like, well, you would have to use then in this situation, the cost arrow in this one, and then triggering condition in this one. And I get that there's situations where you could use them all, but it should also be simplified, right? It should also be simplified to just make it easier for people. There's ways to word things and ways to lay out a card to just make it easier. And I know we're kind of past that point because there's so much content out there. It's just gonna be what it is. But even if like starting, let's say next cycle is Fantastic Four, whatever it is. Let's say starting with that cycle, you just go, okay, we're gonna change some things. We're gonna be really consistent on our cards. That would be amazing because it would help people moving forward. So anyway, I know it's a bit of a rant. I know that's not everyone's favorite thing, but hopefully also it helps explain some of the rule set. And if you're making that mistake, maybe it calls it out and like you kind of get that rules or that portion of the rules. So hopefully that helps out you if you've been struggling with that, because it is something that people struggle with a lot. I see this rules mistake a lot. So anyway, if you like this video, if it was helpful or useful, or if you just like the channel but you don't like this video, do me a huge favor, make sure to hit the like button, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, all that fun stuff. I really appreciate it. Again, sorry about the rant, but hopefully this helps somebody down the road with rules mistakes. And this is just one of my big pet peeves. And maybe you really like this style of video where I just rant about rules mistakes. Well, not rules mistakes, but issues I have with rules, and maybe it teaches you something and you get to learn something. I don't know. Maybe that's an option too. So anyway, appreciate you all, and I'll see you all next time.